Happy Father's Day, everybody. A little bit early here by a couple minutes. I figure that'll give a chance for the people that are coming to log on and get over here. So I'm hoping this will be one of our bigger shows yet. I've done a little bit of marketing for it. We'll see what happens. But I've got a list of stuff I'm going to talk about. I've taken a couple weeks off of doing this, just the gap between book one and book two. We've got a few, I have a few big changes that I'm implementing. Looking at revamping my websites and my online platforms. Right now I have so much crap that I've got to sort through, and I've got to go to this page and do this, and then take the information from that page, put it on another page, and there's just a lot of back and forth to try to contend with. And I'm going to look at some resources to streamline everything, to try to make it all, take everything and put it in one spot. That way I don't have 7 or 8 different places I've got to work through. I can just work through one place and it'll go everywhere. Which, that'll make navigation easier for you guys, and it'll make the management side of it easier for me, because I'm the only person doing this. I don't have a marketing manager. I don't have a full-time agent. Everything that I bring you is from me, and that can be a little stressful at times. But I had made the announcement a couple weeks ago that I was leaving my full-time job to pursue my writing career full-time. And that was the plan up until the point when my job decided that they needed me too much. So they negotiated with me a little bit, and I have dropped to a part-time status through there, and which is still allowing me to keep steady income as well as build my my writing side of things, which I have been doing already. I needed time during normal business hours to make stuff happen. And now that I have that time, I've made a few leaps and bounds already, but there's still a lot more to do. Hardback books, I've spoken a little bit about that before. I've already got the Order of the Trident 1 in hardback format. Order of the Trident 2 will be coming out in the same format very soon. And then Order of the Trident 3, that one will be released very soon. I would like to say within the next month or so. I can't make that an official promise yet, but it is, as far as the writing side, it's pretty much done. We're just going through doing the editing, cleaning it up, and we'll get it out as soon as possible. And damn it, Bree, that one's out and doing fairly well. Even, I think a couple days ago, it finally hit its 30-day mark after its release, so it's now no longer on the new release side of things, but it's still in the top 100, so it's doing remarkably well. Of course, I always need reviews. People that don't write books and don't get to learn this side of the industry don't realize how important reviews are. They tell other readers if your book is worth a shit. For one thing, if you have enough reviews and your book is being talked about enough, then Amazon sees that, hey, this is making me money. So then they turn around and put it on their email list and send it out to people, which just makes it even bigger. So reviews are the bread and butter of trying to market your books on Amazon, or online in general. If you don't have reviews, you're not going to get into new business. So, in kind of the same topic of reviews, I am looking at doing a couple freebies. I'm thinking I haven't done anything on it yet, but I'm looking at making putting together maybe a short book, maybe 20,000 words, just basically more than a pamphlet, but less than a novelette. Just something short that will give you kind of an introduction to what I'm doing, allow you some entertainment, and use that to reward you guys for helping me out by leaving reviews and sharing my post and stuff like that. I mean, really, it all boils down to I need you guys. I can't do what I'm doing without you. And for those of you who have helped me along this already, I'd like to extend a big thank you. You guys make it possible. But at the same time, without more people coming in and helping, I'm falling further and further behind. I have to have people helping me out to do this and make things happen. As I'd already said, I now have more time to devote toward my writing career. That's not just me sitting at home writing on my laptop all day. I've collected a few other of the local authors, and I've got a portfolio of about 42 books that I have access to that I'm meeting with the owners of local bookstores and comic book shops and flea markets that use books. Basically anybody who's willing to purchase and sell new books. I've got a pretty good list that I've written up of every location within about within about an hour's drive of Springfield. Meeting with these people, and I'm trying to get our books on their shelves. The more people know about us, not just me, but all the local authors. We need people, and the more people that know who we are, the better off we're all going to be. I've done numerous interviews before, and I always get asked the question of, are you in competition, or basically, am I competing against the other local authors? And the truth is, no, I'm not. I really don't have any competition. Even people that write in the same genre as I do, I don't consider them competition. If anything, I consider them somebody to learn from and somebody to help, because maybe someday they'll be in a position to help me. And I think really that's the way that we have to look at it. If we start trying to compete with each other, then nobody's going to win. So, truthfully, the market's big enough for all of us. You have big names. I write mostly fantasy. The big names in fantasy, R.A. Salvatore, Tolkien, of course, he's passed away, but, of the ones that are still living, they're fantastic authors. Even Shane Moore has an entire collection of fantasy books, and I've read every one of them, and I enjoy them. But there's not really competition there. There's room for partnership, and there's room to help all of us rise, rather than try to tear the others down and climb to the top. And that's just my take on it. I'm sure not everybody feels the same way I do, but anyway, my blog post, I've already got my post for tomorrow written and ready to go live. It'll usually, the time zone difference, it always wants me to post it at a Pacific time zone. So I try to do it so it posts about 1 o'clock Central Time, which time I'm used to. But blog post will go live tomorrow, and that's part of those big changes I was talking about there at the beginning. If I am able to, I want to get my blogs in line with my website. Including my blog website right now, I have 3 websites I'm trying to manage, and it's just too much for one person to try to do it all at the same time. So I'm going to try to get everything in one place and make it all happen, which that may mean that I have to redesign my business cards again. I may have to update the information. But I want to try to keep it so that everything that's out there already can still apply to what's there. So we'll see how all that works out, and I will try to update you guys if change is necessary. I guess let's go ahead and get on to this. So it's, Father's Day. I'm sure you guys have things you need to do. I've got things I need to do, so we'll get through this, and I'll wrap it up, and we'll go back to our lives. The Order of the Trident Speculum is book 2 in my Elderland series. Which after the Order of the Trident Exodus, which will be book 3, Those three will be together, and then the very next book will be called Bloodlines. And while it's still in the Elderland series, it's going to be a different point in time. So you won't have to read these three to understand that one. You'll be able to jump in and just pick up from that one, and then explore the world as you see fit. Chapter 1, The Shadows Rise. Rolling clouds of gray soared across the heavens, leaving an eternal darkness over the world below. Far to the south, an explosion of energy washed across the land, not seen but felt. The mystical wave traveled in all directions, announcing its arrival to all capable of understanding. The city of Idenfall was the largest for months in any direction. Its northern face was protected by a wall of mountains wrapping around and swallowing the ancient fortress settlement. A large chasm blocked the south, limiting access to a handful of snow-covered stone bridges stretching across the deep ravine. The clanking of swords and guttural laughter echoed from the west, where a massive army of orcs was engaged in their daily training. They displayed thick armors and heavy weapons, made for purpose rather than show. Crude structures stood around the orc grounds. These were lined with fur against the harsh winter winds and steady snowfall. It was a city in its own rights on the outskirts of Idenfall. A great many orcs stood in a large circle, cheering those within. Of the two castes, the veterans were easy to identify. They wore trophies of fur and hide over their crude armor. Their gray-tinted skin was marred, serving as both resume and medal in their battle-hardened society. The younger orcs wore no such markings, having not earned that honor yet. Several unarmored orcs fought back to back, fending off their circling aggressors. Lashing out, they fought to keep them at bay. As one would fall, the others would engulf them, tightening their ranks. The largest of orcs watched from their stage, made of large bone. Among them, the biggest wore the pelt of a black bear over his back. Its head was mounted atop his helm, giving him the appearance of a large creature. The weathered skin clinging to his face was covered in scars of victories long past. He sat in his chair watching the younglings train. Only the strongest would survive. He had no use for anything less. The elder orc looked upon the fight, sniffing at the air. Pressing his hands against the arms of his rugged throne, he pushed himself up, towering over the others. "Stand down!" His booming voice echoed across the field, halting all within earshot. A somewhat smaller orc, but equally marred, approached. "Warchief, what do you command?" "Time for training is over. Gear and group them. No more than 4 paired together. Something's coming, and we need to be ready." The grizzled warchief stepped down from his platform and onto the layered snow. He felt the pain of his years starting to catch up with him, though he was still strong enough to hold off any who dared challenge him. Looking over his shoulder, he gazed upon the orc once again. "That one on the end's a bit scrawny. See how he fares against the rest. Make sure they know their place." "As you command, Warchief." The orc marched across the field, listening to the snow crunch beneath his boots. Reaching one of the towered archways of the ancient citadel, he pulled the wooden door open and stepped inside. The chiseled ashlar of the looming fortress was weathered from time and element, but held strong, forming a massive cathedral into the mountain city. Near the peak of the tallest spire, a figure stared out the stained-glass window, watching the commander leave the field. The orc was nearing the end of his days, but he was too stubborn to die in his sleep. He'd have to go with a weapon in hand. But none of the other orcs were strong enough to surpass him. New blood was needed, but it seemed a disservice to get rid of him through simpler manners. No, the old orc would die, but it would be in service to him. The shattered figure felt a sensation erupt at a great distance. There was only one thing that could be responsible for such an outburst. Time has come. Spinning on heel, he marched across the throne room and into the grand hall. The walls are decorated with black and white tapestries, each one embroidered to show an antlered face stretching out overlooking the world. They fluttered as he passed, falling back to their stagnant status afterward. Between each hanging cloth was a sconce mounted to the wall. Orange and yellow flame danced across the top, seemingly to its own rhythm. Not even his passing made them alter direction. His boots echoed along the bare stone floors, announcing his approach long before his arrival. Rounding the corner, he passed into a narrow stairwell and rushed down, circling several times. Reaching the bottom, he watched the dust fly from his steps. It had been so long since he'd visited this place. Taking a deep breath, he continued on while staring at the large doors of black stone in the distance. They seemed so far despite the relative short walk. Cautiously making his way forward, he placed his gloved hand upon the ancient stone. It was cold to the touch, and even through the thick leather. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes for the briefest of moments, unsure if he was ready for what awaited him on the other side. Clenching his hands around the pitted rings, he pulled, watching the seam between the doors widen. Stale air and dust rushed through the widening cracks, showering him in its stench. He wasn't surprised. It had been a millennia since he last opened them. None of the others would dare, even if they knew they were here. He opened the doors just enough to pass. Stepping through, he felt the lingering presence of the divine might that once occupied the room. Gone for an eternity, but still remnant. The 12 towering statues stared down at him, their faces gone long before his time. He marched through their pensive gaze, stopping in front of a dull mirror on the far wall. A thick haze drifted over the surface like a cloud of smoke in the dust-filled room. Placing his hand against the dirty reflection, he pushed, feeling the magic swirl within. The surface flexed slightly, forming around his hand. The tension was that of a pool of water, waiting to swallow him whole. He pushed harder, forcing his arm into the mirror. Buried to the elbow, he pushed as hard as he could. Feeling the resistance increase. His arm quivered against the force, unable to go further. "Azarel, damn it, let me go!" He strained with all his might, trying to pass through the standing portal. A dark shadow fell over the room. The Lilliputian... Why did I use that word? It's a fancy word for dim light. The light breaching the doors was snuffed out, leaving the room in total darkness. He felt the abundance of power surround him. It twisted his insides, making him feel sick. So much evil in one place was too much for anyone, even him. Forcing the pain down as best he could, he held his resolve against the entity. "I'm surprised it took you this long." He felt the words resonate in himself more than ever hearing them, though the power behind each syllable took the foundations of the towering. Though the power behind each syllable shook the foundations of the towering statues, knocking dust from the ceiling. Why do you use my name in vain, Resurrect? You should have known you can't leave me so easily. None can. Save it. Why can't I go through? It's open. I felt it. The expanded shadow rolled into a single orb and began to grow into a humanoid form. The misty tendrils solidified and took on features. Within a few moments, a woman stood in the chamber beside him. Her long brown hair was pulled into a tail at the back, draped down over her lavender-plated robes of ivory. The booming voice silenced. It was replaced by his smooth, compassionate vocals. "It's true that it's been opened, but you're bound to this place, as am I." Resurrect trembled beneath his armor. For one as powerful as he, he was helpless against her. She could destroy him with a mere thought if she so desired. He dropped to a knee, bowing deeply. "My apologies, Azarel. I didn't mean to offend." She stepped toward him and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Rise, you owe me no apology. I've come to help you." "Help me? Why would she do that?" He stared up at her, lost in the words. "You brought me here to rule. Why would you help me go home after all this time?" Resurrect picked himself up. Even his larger stature, he always seemed dwarfed by her. "We want the same thing, to return home. In a roundabout way, you serve as part of my lock. So long as the Night Kings remain, I am trapped." Azarel turned from him and approached the mirror, looking deep into the hues of speckled shadow. "My lady, if we're what's keeping you here, why don't you just kill us and take your revenge? You're more than capable now that the way is open." He studied her movement. It was as if she was looking upon the essence of existence, slowly losing himself in the glory. She turned to gaze upon him once again. "Things aren't so simple. Even if I wanted to harm you, I can't. This body is mere illusion. It can't physically act in this realm without a host. That is why I speak through my devoted. Resurrect watched a tear roll down her cheek. He knew it was in his best interest to remain silent. She turned away, looking into the mirror once again. If you are to use this gateway, you must appoint a new Night King, though not just anyone will do. Only a select few have the potential to harness the powers coursing through you. I'm afraid you won't find many in this, she paused, selecting the appropriate word, prison. Even rarer will be one who can free me. Do you know where I can find such a being? Resurrect kept his eyes locked on her. Despite her demeanor, he'd fallen prey to her tricks before and wasn't about to fall again. There isn't one, at least not yet. I may not be able to find the one to free her, but I can find one to free myself, he thought. How will I know when I've found someone capable? As Arl stared at him in silence, closing her eyes, she felt the tears start to roll again. Stowing herself, she spoke. Memories of your past will guide the way. Though I warn you, perception has a way of tainting what we thought we once knew. He watched her form shift back into shadow and fade away, returning to the sparse rays of flickering light to the chamber. You are leaving me with riddles? Why can't you just tell me what I need to know? The booming voice returned, dropping him to his knees. Not all answers are black and white. Heavy flakes of snow rained down upon the clouds, layering into heavy drifts along the forest edge. Beyond the tree line, frozen leaves could be seen protruding through the light layers of snow, most of it blocked by the thick canopy. The whinny of horses echoed from the open wasteland, frantic in their unease. Several figures rested in the blackened saddles, staring into the dark woodland. A legion of orcs stood behind them, quiet in their ranks, refusing to draw the attention from their masters. Resurrect stood in the stirrups and threw his leg over the black-haired steed. Jumping down, the powdered snow exploded around him, adding to the constant furies. It clung to his black cloak and smoked armor, contrasting against him for the briefest moment until it melted away against his body heat and soaked in. Handing the reins to one of his mounted companions, he turned and marched into the forest. The chilling wind rolled against the tree line, creating a vortex of snow at the edge. Pressing through, Resurrect took his first steps into the dark woodland, feeling the crippling breeze fade away. He stared into the natural darkness, glancing up at the treetops. He had no illusions he was being watched. In fact, he'd be a bit disappointed if he wasn't. Such a felling wouldn't speak well for the thousands of men he'd lost in this forest. A faint smile on his lips, he marched into the depths, listening to the frozen ground crunch beneath his boots. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. He could smell the power radiating within this place, though he couldn't identify much else. It was simply a wellspring of the mystical energy, overflowing all around him. It was a shame his men hadn't been able to claim these lands. Such a sight would grant untold advantage over the other Night Kings. A familiar scent reached his nostrils. He stopped, sniffing, searching the air for its direction. Finding his quarry, Resurrect marched along the dark forest, stopping just outside the unseen barrier. He extended his hand and touched it, watching the glimmering waves of magic swirl around his blackened gloves. Stepping through a large fortress stood just ahead of him, wrapped in a fortified wall. The ring of a hammer echoed inside the protective dome, accompanied by the scent of cooked meat. "So this is Heidengau?" he questioned aloud, casually walking toward the sealed gate. He didn't expect them to let him in. Were the roles reversed, he certainly wouldn't. "Halt at the gate!" The guard froze at the sight, recognizing who he was. He could smell their fear. It had a sweet stench, like that of rotting flesh. His cheek tightened, smirking his superiority over the frightened collection of humans and elves. Certainly his presence circulated their little town by now. Not so much as a whisper could be heard on the other side of the towering barrier. What do you want, Resurrect?" One of the guards choked on his words, clearly unhappy that he had to be the one to talk. Resurrect suspected the man had lost a game of chance, leaving him the duty of addressing him. He stared at the man, holding complete silence. It wasn't that he didn't have words to say. He simply found it amusing to watch the man squirm in his discomfort. He could feel the unseen archers trained on him. He imagined their shaking palms struggling to hold the string of their bows drawn and ready to fire. It was good they were on edge. It would make his task easier. "Send out Elelon. I'll have my words with her." He turned, presenting his back to the gate, and took a few steps away. A moment later, he heard the gate creak open slightly. Slowly turning around, he locked eyes on the elf standing a few feet from him. Her steps were so light he hadn't heard her approach. She wore a fine garment of white silk, the oversized cuff draped down past her waist, blending in with the flowing material. Her long golden hair was braided and hanging down her back. He didn't have to see a weapon to know she was armed. If not with unseen steel, he could smell the magics flowing through her. "Lady Elrond," he greeted, offering a mock bow. "Why have you come here, Resrick?" Her voice carried into the thinning treetops like a spring flower on the wind. Can a man visit his old friend without having ulterior motives? We're anything but old friends. We fought together once, a long time ago. Any friendship that may have flourished has long since shriveled into a husk of remorse. I'll ask again, what are you doing here? He sighed heavily. "Down to business, then. I've come to offer you a truce. My men will never again step into this forest under my command. Any who do will be subject to your penalty." "And what do you want in exchange for such a deal?" "Oh, nothing much. I simply require the services of your scouts. My own are unsuitable to this task. However, yours know how to acquire their target without killing them." "And who would my scouts be seeking?" She kept her eyes locked on the Night King. He was conniving and deceptive. Even the slightest shift in his eyes could alert her to his schemes. "Travelers from a land different than this one. I can't say what they'll be wearing or what they may have with them. Only that they'll be unfamiliar with these lands and coming from the ruins outside of Elgon." He hid his intentions, knowing she was searching them. Truth was, it didn't matter who found them first, only that they were found. If the resistance got to them before his men, it would allow him to kill two birds with one stone. Of course, he didn't expect her to agree. She'd try to play him just as he was trying to play her. "So we have a deal?" "I'll consider it." "I'm afraid I need an answer now. You know as well as I that you don't have time to move your little settlement here before my man can be upon it. And I'm sure your scouts have already reported the army parked right outside the forest edge." She considered her options. He was right. She didn't have time to evacuate, at least not without calling the Charliettes to their position. They could hold them off for a while, but there was no way to save them all if his men came. Damn him for forcing me into such a position. I should have seen it coming. Refusing to betray her demeanor, she let her emotions subside. "Very well, Resrick, you have a deal. I'll have my men search for these travelers. If we find them, I'll send word by way of missive." "That doesn't quite work for me. I'll leave one of my men in your custody. Beat him, lock him up, torture him. I don't care. Just make sure he lives and is able to travel when time comes. Release him with their location, and you'll never have to fear assault from me again." She took a deep breath. "Fine. When you reach the field, send your man in. My scouts will pick him up from there." Resrick spun around and headed for the unseen barrier. "Oh, and Resrick, don't bother coming back. We'll be long gone before you have the opportunity to get this close again." And that is the end of Chapter 1. We'll continue next week, Sunday. I'm going to aim for 6 just because that seems to allow me some time in the earlier part of the day. I've actually had a request from actor Scott Kelly. He's a good friend of mine. He's been one of the people that have always taken an interest in what I'm doing. He's always shared my posts, liked my stuff, and he's usually here watching with us. Every time that he gets the opportunity, he asks for me or one of the other authors that we know to read a Penthouse Forum letter. So I'm going to see what I can do to find one of those. I don't have a big porn collection anymore. Not that I've ever really had a big porn collection anyway, but see what I can do to find one of those, and we will do a reading of that prior to me starting Chapter 2. And that's about all I've got. Thanks for turning in, and happy Father's Day. And if you would, get on Amazon and review my books. Like I said earlier, it helps more than you'll ever know. But thank you guys, and have a fantastic evening. Bye.